My name is Macy, and I am a jeweler at Maejean Vintage. I am going to walk you through how to restore a 1930s Art Deco ring. This ring is a 14-karat yellow gold setting. The gemstone in this ring is a created spinel stone. The biggest things wrong with this ring were the misshapen band. There's a resizing bar at the bottom of the ring band from a previous resizing, and then the gemstone will need to be replaced since it's not in any salvageable condition. This ring might probably only be worth maybe $100, and when we're finished, this ring might sell for about $4,000 to $5,000. The first thing that I will do with any restoration is to take out any gemstones that can't be saved. There's a large part on the underside of the stone that had cracked off. I am getting rid of the resizing band because oftentimes, especially in vintage and antique pieces, the resizing was often poorly done. This tool is called a jeweler saw, and I'm using this to cut out the sizing bar rather than unsoldering it, just because I was having some trouble unsoldering it. So just to be safe and eliminate the chance of accidentally melting the whole ring while trying to unsolder it, I just decided to cut it out. Soldering is a process of joining two pieces of metal with solder, and that solder can be either silver solder or gold solder. When I remove that piece of metal, solder will only flow if it's a perfect seam. So once I cut the sizing bar out, I have to file the ends so they're perfectly parallel to each other, so that when I close that seam, there's no air in between so that the solder can flow. I am hammering the seam shut, so I'm trying to close those two ends together. Even if the ring band isn't perfectly round, that can always be fixed later, as long as those two ends are touching each other to get them ready to be soldered back together. And then I take the ring to my soldering bench, and I'm going to prep the ring for soldering. I apply what is called flux, and flux will prevent any oxides that will form on the surface of the ring while being soldered from the torch from building up. And then adding my gold solder to the seam where I intend to have it flow. Then I'm going to be using a 14-karat gold solder, which is essentially just an alloy of gold and also zinc. And zinc is what makes the metal melt at a low temperature. So it allows the solder to flow into the seam of what I'm trying to connect, and it will bind those two pieces together permanently. And then I use my torch to evenly heat up the piece in order to get the solder up to its melting temperature. The prongs on this ring are cracked and worn from age. They just need a little bit of reinforcement. I add some solder to the prongs to give them some extra thickness so I can create a new seat later on in the process for the stone. Once I'm finished with the prongs, I take the ring back to my bench and remove some of the extra solder material from the inside of the ring band. I use a tool called a flex shaft with a silicone bit, and that's going to remove some of the material from the solder seam so that when I hammer it round again, the solder doesn't embed itself into the metal. Once that material is mostly removed, I move on to hammering a round shape back into the ring with a rawhide mallet and a steel ring mandrel. And since the steel ring mandrel is tapered to accommodate for all different kinds of sizes of rings, I frequently flip back and forth and work from both sides to make sure that one side is not larger than the other side. And I work from all sides of the piece except for on the ring head, because I don't want to deform the head of the ring. Once I'm done Rounding the band back out, I go ahead and I start removing some of the solder from the outside of the band, and I use this with a hand file. And then once I'm finished with the hand file, I start using some silicone polishing wheels with my Boredom Flex shaft to further remove some of the scratches and begin the process of starting to polish the piece. So I go through a process of 4 different abrasivenesses, starting from the most coarse to the finest, to get the bulk of the polishing done on the outside of the piece. Once I'm done working on the ring band, I move on to polishing the inside of the ring, starting with a polishing compound that's called white diamond. And this is an abrasive polishing compound, so even though it's polishing, it still removes material from the surface of the metal. And then after that, I move on to a polishing compound called Fabuluster, which is a polishing compound that is very tiny clay bits. So it kind of brings out the really luster, high polish finish to the metal. And once I'm done with that, I repeat the entire process on the outside of the ring so that I can get the ring back to a mirror finish like it should be. Once I'm done with polishing, I move on to getting the stone ready to be set. I'm replacing the created spinel with a diamond because it's a large enough setting that it would make a really nice engagement ring. It's a solid ring setting. This diamond is 1.3 carats. To prepare for the diamond to be set, I kind of evaluate where all the prongs are at. I make sure that they're all even, they're all nice and reinforced from the soldering that I have already done. And I start to carve out the material with some setting burrs and ball burrs to try and create a more perfect seat for the diamond to sit in. Once that's done, I use a little bit of wax to place the stone into the ring setting. And from there, since it's a good fit, I'm ready to start pushing the prongs over. And so I use a tool that is called a bezel pusher to start to push over the prongs to hold the diamond in place. We are so happy with how this ring came out. We're so happy to give it a second life.